The next presentation is a special one in a lot of ways, something that we've been working on for many years here. You know, we know that our work to help families facing FTD wouldn't be nearly as robust, as thoughtful, or impactful without the input of people living with an FTD diagnosis. For a long stretch of time, AFTD's work was informed by a group of people diagnosed, known informally as the think tank. In recent months, that group's become more formally established as our organization's Persons with FTD Advisory Council. Their contributions and ideas guide the resources we create and the supports that we offer, helping to ensure that our work is beneficial to both persons diagnosed and their families. At this time, I'd like to welcome AFTD's Program Manager, Matt Sharp, a key contributor to AFTD's support and education efforts that benefit both care partners and people with FTD. Matt and I have been colleagues since 2009, so it's great to have him with us here today. Matt's going to lead members of our advisory council, Teresa Webb, Bob Meddaugh, Amy Shives, and Ann Fargusson, in a panel discussion with an audience Q&A to follow. So Matt, welcome.
Thank you, Sharon. It's my very great pleasure to be here today with Ann, Amy, Teresa, and Bob. For the next 20 minutes or so, I will be asking each of our advisory council members questions about their experiences being diagnosed with FTD and living with the diagnosis. But I do want to encourage our viewers to submit additional questions as well. And we'll try and get to as many as we have time for. So hello, Teresa. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Kind of excited.
Okay. So hopefully our additional members will be joining us. Hello, Amy.
Hey.
Yay. Hello. And last but not least, hi, Bob. Thanks for being here today, everybody. So I guess to start us off, Ann, I was going to start with you. I know your background is in healthcare as an RN, and I'm wondering, could you tell us about your experience being diagnosed with FTD, and how long did it take, and how many doctors did you have to see before you were an FTD diagnosis?
My journey started when I was about age 6. My husband and I were in marriage counseling, and the therapist suggested I was depressed, and and said I need to be seen by a psychiatrist. So I went, and he tried several depression medications that didn't do much of anything. And then I saw a different psychiatrist who thought it wasn't working because I had bipolar type 2. And then he added more medication. Things seemed to improve, but I was still struggling. My emotions were all over the place, and yet I was still working. My therapist sent me to a psychologist who did different types of mini mental tests stating something was seriously wrong, but she didn't know what it was. One of my sons told my husband that mom is acting like grandpa. My father, who was diagnosed with FTD, but it was called subcortical gliosis at that time. I quit my job, tried another one, and 3 months later I was fired, tried another job, and subsequently fired again after 3 months. So my husband took me to UCSF, where I was diagnosed at age 48 with FTD. You could say I was lucky because I didn't have to see a lot of neurologists or primary care doctors, just a lot of psychiatrists. But I know that there is a struggle for a lot more and for many more years who are trying to get a proper diagnosis.
Thank you. Yes. So it was at least 2 psychiatrists and several jobs before you got to the diagnosis.
Yeah, about 4 psychiatrists, actually.
Wow, 4. And none of them did any of them even think neurological issues, or were they just in the psychiatry realm?
They just did the psychiatry stuff, trying to control my behavior and stuff, yeah.
Even though you didn't have any history of psychiatric diagnoses before that, at age 46, they thought maybe you had suddenly become bipolar. And having a family member with it, did that help or hurt at all? I mean, did anybody else recognize, like, oh, this looks a lot like what happened to him?
No, because, you know, like usual, they thought you were just stressed at your job. That's why I quit one job. And then they just thought, well, I was just stressed. That's why we're having marriage problems and that kind of thing. And it just was just went like that, you know,
Yeah.
just from one thing to the next.
And once you were diagnosed, how did it feel? Was it a relief? Did it answer any questions for you?
Well, once I was diagnosed, you know, they gave me 3 to 5 years to live. And my husband was like, what? Okay. And,
Wow.
oh yeah. So, you know, went down that road for a while, but now I'm at it for 15 years now. So,
Wow. So basically, you're diagnosed and adios, right? Not much else.
yes.
Sorry to hear that. Well, I'm glad you finally made it to UCSF and figured this out. So, Amy, on to you. How did FTD impact your career? Sounded like Anne certainly went through several jobs before she actually ended up getting diagnosed. Were you employed when you were diagnosed? And
I was. I brought to that many aspects. I have behavioral FTD. What we arrive at with this disease process is a combination of nature and nurture. And in my case, that certainly was the case. I was raised by a mother in a family who had FTD. So that helps you behave in different ways. Being raised by someone that was unrecognized as having FTD, because of course it was many years ago. My life was altered by that, as well as my FTD brain, because I do have FTD, and my belief is that it's been there all along because my mother had it. It alters your life, and we bring all of this to our decisions, and so we work towards all of us evolving. And I evolved into being a teacher person, from being in social work, nonprofits, having an MED, being an educator. So when I became very symptomatic, I was a college counselor, a tenured faculty member for 30 years. What happened there was my decisions started to not be productive for my position. A counselor, as most of us know, you have to be pretty even-keeled and able to step back and make decisions that are helpful for mostly the student and the institution. And I started not to be able to do that as well as I needed to, which I needed to do that very well. And I ceased doing that. What's left then, and I had a very intricate job, by the way. I had many demands on me as far as my memory, my ability to step back, emergency things, as far as responding to emergencies in a building and things, emergency counseling. What then evolves after you figure out that isn't going well and you're not able to do your job or be accommodated, because I can't be accommodated and have someone with me helping me. You evolve. And what Teresa and I always said is, well, we went home and we sat down and then we said, well, this isn't working. So that's what you do. That's what you're programmed to do from the society of, oh, go home, you're done, goodbye. What evolves is you have to pick a new path. You have to get a new vocation, and you got to figure this out with a broken brain. So we all have different stories here, but the four of us today can show you that we are advocates for people with FTD. That's why we're here today. I will note that this morning there was some information given about our lack of insight. I think you will see here today we are quite insightful. And I needed to say that. That insight isn't something that necessarily goes away. What's left is a new path. So here I am. I volunteer. I think most of us here do. We use our old information, old education in ways that are productive for people that we can help or nurture or be around. So that's my deal. Do I like having lost my career? Not at all. Do I grieve over it still? Absolutely. Will I always? Yes. It was a good fit for me. It enhanced my life, and nothing will replace that as of yet.
Mhm. Well, thank you. And yeah, you're quite right. I know from spending time with all four of you that you are full of insights not only about yourself, but a lot of other areas as well. So lack of insight is certainly something that affects some portion of people with FTD, but certainly not everyone by any means at all. So Teresa, it sounded like, Amy, you had taken experience of having a mother with an undiagnosed mental disorder or cognitive problem and turn that into a job as a teacher. You know, that sort of makes sense and somehow to explain what was going on around you, and you turn that into a career helping to explain to other people what was going on around them. But Teresa, how do you feel like your diagnosis has affected your relationships with friends and family members? Are there things that have changed, and are there things that you enjoy now that you didn't enjoy prior to a diagnosis?
Well, first I want to thank you, Matt, for and Sharon for getting this adversary group here and to present. It means a lot. In a matter of a short follow-up visit with my neurologist, my best life became my worst. While my wife Denise and daughter Renee and I were relieved to know what it was, I was left in a state of despair. Some of my family members refused to acknowledge my diagnosis, choosing instead to say that I was lazy, crazy, even mentally ill, and they no longer speak to me. It's hard and exhausting to rise above losing family to your own disease. My friends have all evaporated except for my bestie, Mary. She walks alongside of me and accepts me, TPA and all. I love ballroom dancing. Before my diagnosis, I competed in ballroom dance. Now, don't get me wrong, I wasn't out there shaking my bomb, but what I did do is I competed in international standards, breathtaking waltz, snappy quick step. It was my passion. But like so much that ebbs away with FTD, so did my understanding of new choreography. To be honest, other than dance, I really don't remember prior to my diagnosis what it was that I enjoyed, other than spending time with my wife and daughter. This sounds pretty dark, doesn't it? I mean, this disease is dark and twisty. But for me, there came a point when I realized that I was standing at the fork of the road. I could either do nothing, enveloping myself in sadness, or I could rise above it. And since those that know and love me so well know I love a challenge, so I rose above it. And now I look differently at life. My pace is slower, but that does not mean I am not doing, because I am. I found through fitness that it has enhanced my physical and psychological health. One day while I was at the gym, it occurred to me that perhaps I might like to run. So like Forrest, I did run, and I began to train. I would talk to my daughter about running and about shoes and hydration, and my wife would help me with my running form, as I didn't have any. Also, my wife Denise was my Sherpa. On many early 5 and 10K runs, she was always at the finish line, always smiling with arms wide open to give me a winning hug. I even ran a few 5Ks and a half marathon with my daughter. My running days came to a halt because of some chronic injuries, but that has not stopped me from embracing fitness. Are you kidding? With Pilates and bar work and kettlebells. Oh my. But my favorite is my Peloton spin bike. Why? Because no matter how fast I go, I'm still in the same place and I can't get lost. I enjoy feeding and watching the hummingbirds that are always in our yard, and actually to sit quietly and watch the different birds that migrate keeps my anxiety at bay. I do have challenges reading, but I still read, even if it means I read the same paragraph or the same sentence over and over. I am still doing. I have a deep passion now for advocating, using my voice to educate, to bring hope, to help others to understand what FTD, PPA, what it is not, and what it looks like. You know, I am really fortunate to have such a loving and understanding wife and a compassionate, supportive daughter that, despite their own fears, have stood strong, encouraging me to live my best life, no matter what it looks like. And I can say sometimes it's pretty messy, but it's still my best life. It's my new life, and we all live it to the best that we can.
Well, I know AFTD is very grateful that you're using your voice and your newfound passion for advocacy to help us and inform our work at AFTD about how we can best help everybody who's affected by this disease. I am sorry to hear that certain parts of your family just stopped having contact with you. That is just tragic. Bob, did you feel that, and this is, Bob, a question for you, did you feel that people acted or treated you differently when they learned that you have been diagnosed?
I guess the answer would be no and yes. Probably 80% of the people think, oh, you don't deliver flowers? They don't have any idea what FTD is. So it's given me opportunity to give 2-minute short courses to people, including medical professionals and doctors who think the only dementia was Alzheimer's. And so, in a way, that's a little scary that other people don't know anything. And we have a osteopathic medical college here, Des Moines University. And I know one time, it's probably been 4 or 5 years ago, at one of their senior health fairs, their education director came up and kind of snagged me and said, hey, would you be willing to talk? So for the last 3 or 4 years, I go and talk to second-year medical students about dementia and what a person may look like. And then the doctor that initially, and usually I follow my neurologist. She speaks one day, and then I'm the the one they hold up to. This is what a dementia person may look like. And the thought was, after they get out of medical school, they are so inundated with information overload that if I can plant a seed in the back of their mind of somebody that doesn't fit certain criteria, they won't shuffle them off to the psychiatrist or something, and they may send them to neurology, an appropriate neurologist who may look at what's going on. So that kind of got me, going with. Well, I guess I've been involved with AFTD one way or another for quite a while. It's probably been 20 years for me. Mine is a result of multiple head traumas. So finding the doctor, they were looking at other things, and the last minute said, let's send him to a neurologist. Took her 3 minutes to diagnose me. And I thought it was just my wife saying bad things against me. So I stomped off for 2 days. And, the denial process I see hits many people for a period of time. So, but there are things that I can do, and I think everybody else is Teresa, exercise is very good for us to try to keep that blood going to our brain and keep us informed. But I also try to find trying to have a routine. So I'm kind of doing the same things, which is somewhat difficult for me. The multitasking part of my former brain is just down to the T of tasking. If I can stay on one task, I'm okay. But if I get interrupted either by myself or somebody else, I lose where I am, and I entirely forget what it was. So that's somewhat of a challenge. Make sure that I get enough sleep, because I have sleep apnea, and sometimes I forget to put on my mask, or if I have to get up and do something, take the dog out or help my wife, I come back and forget. So repetition and doing the same thing are helpful. But as far as other people, many people initially don't know that I have it, especially if I meet them in the morning and not in the afternoon or in the evening when I may be grumpy and nasty and out of sorts, shall I say. Yeah, a few years ago, I was giving I guess I gave several presentations about dementias and FTD, and I had this doctor come up to me and he's, I can tell you, Bob, there's nothing the matter with your brain. You don't have any dementia or anything. And I immediately called and talked to the director of the Alzheimer's Association here, who was a friend of mine, said, if anybody's calling for a recommendation or something from this guy, I don't know if he's a urologist or a dermatologist or something, but it's far away from the brain. He has no idea what he's talking about. And if if he's got patients that have something, he is not even seeing it. But so it's, I think it's a major challenge in the medical field. I was seeing my orthopedic surgeon now, who has been operating on me for 30 years. In 1984, a car hit me at 40 miles an hour broadside on my bicycle. And so he's been putting me back together. But his new nurse came in and he said, now Bob has FTD, he has dementia. So she comes to ask me questions and immediately turns to my wife and starts talking to her. I could have been a cardboard cutout. And later when she went back and was talking to him, she got her butt reamed. I've seen him do this to people many other times, not necessarily about dementia, but talk to patients. She's sitting there, she can hear it. You don't have to talk to her, and he will be able to answer you. So on one hand, people don't know we have it. I would say all of us here have talked or been talking to people, and they wouldn't have a clue that there's anything the matter with us. Now, if they saw us later, perhaps, or over a period of time, they would see that there's something going on. So it's a challenge for us. It's a challenge for the caregivers, and other people don't have any understanding of this disease. So because we think FTD is a disease when it's probably an umbrella, there could be 8 separate diseases. A couple of neurologists have told me. When we learn enough about the brain that we can specifically pick parts out, whether you're having PPA or cortical basal syndrome or behavior variant, or but we can all have parts that mix together, and that makes it difficult for a lot of people to get diagnosed, and a lot of difficult for us living with it, because it sometimes comes and goes. So I guess that's where I am.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you for sharing all of that. those experiences. I would like to try and open up some Q&A right now. One of I think we may have time for one or two questions. It sounds like all of you had a somewhat less than positive experience with an initial diagnosis. And I think maybe we'll start with you, Teresa, to answer. Was there anything you feel like a neurologist or a doctor could have told you at the time of diagnosis that would have helped you find a more positive path sooner? Is there anything that could have made it less negative?
I think that had I been told about resources that were available, I think that would have made a world of a difference. I kind of liken that into as an RN, and I worked as a clinical manager. You know, when someone has a new diagnosis, you're there with support, with resources, and I wasn't given that. I don't think any of us were. And to just give a diagnosis, we need support. And I think if I had gotten the resources, if I could find it, I think it would have made a lot. It certainly would have helped my daughter. It would have helped Denise, because we searched, and I live in a big city, and there wasn't anything here in Phoenix. There was nothing in 2010 when I was diagnosed, and the only support groups there was for people that had PPA due to stroke, not an FTD. And these were all older people, and I was younger. And so Denise had nothing in common. There was no commonality there. So she was, she too was left in the kind of just out there fumbling around. But yeah, I think that it's important.
So and it's like now there may be some more supports, at least online, for people who are diagnosed. Well, thank you all again for sharing your time and insights with us today. I very much look forward to working with you going forward through our advisory council. I think we've got a lot of great potential to do some great things.